Hi, and welcome back to Birth and Baby Talk. I'm Leanne Palmerston. I'm one of the owners here at Hamilton Family Doulas, and this week I'm talking to you solo. Yeah, I'm here in my capacity as your lovable but kooky aunt, Leanne, who is a Gen Xer and a unapologetic slacker mom. And being a bit of a Gen Xer, we really do have our own kind of operating mode that is a little different than our dear friends who are millennials. And I think sometimes, when I work with clients, I often say things that kind of highlight the fact that I'm a bit of a Gen X mom. And I thought maybe I'd bring a bit of that advice to you, dear watcher, dear listener, and see if I can maybe help you with a few things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about a couple of sort of philosophical bases that I use and that often informs the way I care for my clients and the advice or guidance I might give them. And I'll talk a little bit about that sort of philosophy and then give you a couple of examples of it in the real world, which, if you've been watching my show long enough, that's kind of my main modus operandi. So, first of all, I like to always make sure that people understand that babies are infinitely adaptable. They very easily slip into your own rhythms and lifestyles. As a parent, so many parents get really freaked out about bringing a baby into their life. And sure, things are going to change, but at the same time, your baby will just adapt. So if you guys are homebodies who love to take on projects, maybe you have a lot of hobbies and things around the house, you love to build yourself a new kitchen every few years or something. Well, your baby will sort of fit into that. And if you're the kind of folks who like to get out hiking every single weekend and love to road trip and explore new things, your baby will adapt to that too. And you're not going to have to do anything special. Now, given I do recognize, of course, that some babies have personalities that maybe make it a little less easy for them to adapt to some things. And I'm sorry, I'm obsessing with my bangs here because they're grown out and I don't have an appointment to get them cut for about a month, but so I apologize for fiddling with my bangs. But to get back onto track, yeah, some babies have temperaments that are a little maybe higher maintenance. Babies they have a harder time getting to sleep, a harder time staying asleep. And of course, sometimes those babies are going to need a few extra considerations. But for the most part, your baby is going to be able to catch a nap in the back of the car, safe in their car seat. They'll be able to catch a nap in a carrier as you walk them through a nice afternoon hike. They'll be able to snooze in the stroller as you go about running errands. Your baby will be able to adapt to whatever you need them to as you're moving through your daily life. And so, yeah, I use examples of sleeping, especially because that's where I see that adaptability. And I know as babies get a little bit older, so as we move out of the newborn stage into that 3, 4, 5 month stage where babies are really solidifying their sleep schedules and their daily rhythms, that some parents can get really a little freaked out. Maybe they needed a little extra help to get their baby to that sleep spot that they were all dreaming of, like a good maybe 10 to 12 hours of sleep overnight. And that was a parent's goal. And they worked really hard to get their baby to do that by shifting around naps and things and making sure their baby gets a certain amount of stimulation at the right time of day and not stimulation at different times of day. And that definitely is a lot of hard work. But at the same time, if you take a day off from that schedule because maybe you have important things to do and you want to do something different with your baby or your family, then that's okay. Your baby will adapt and flow back into that schedule with very little interruption. So because I do see parents changing their schedules dramatically to adapt to a baby's schedule. And it's totally possible for both to coexist in harmony, and for your baby to understand that, like sometimes snoozing on the go is how rest happens, and sometimes snoozing in a very quiet, consistent spot. There's a phone call. Um, Sometimes snoozing in a consistent spot is how sleep is and rest is going to happen. And so I don't want I don't want people to feel like they're controlled by their baby's schedules, because babies' rhythms shift and adjust over time. Your baby is not going to have the exact same sleeping patterns from month to month for the rest of their lives. They shift and adjust. And so you can take advantage of that adaptability and that infinite sort of retrainability that babies have, so that you can be, a little looser, a little calmer around things like schedules and naps and sleep times. Um, Another thing I want to talk about is, I'm just looking down at my notes. Babies get their first and best support from you as a parent. So what we really mean by that is that you as a parent of a brand new baby, you become an integral part of their whole nervous system, I guess I would describe it. Um, Babies and parents have this thing that's called co-regulation. So, when you as a parent get upset, most of the time you're able to like feel your feelings and then think through what's happening, make some choices about how you're going to manage those feelings. If you're very upset, you might do some breathing exercises. You might remove yourself from a situation. You might go to a place that is dark and quiet and safe feeling in order to allow those feelings to happen, then dissipate, and then for you to come up with a strategy for, if you need to do anything different to manage things. And babies can't do that. They actually require you as a caregiver to co-regulate them. So when a baby gets really upset, they can't just decide, like after 5 minutes of crying, oh, I guess maybe I shouldn't be upset and I'll calm myself down. No. Now, they really do require a caregiver to actually physically hold them and to soothe them. So, for co-regulation, we do things like cuddling babies, singing to them, rocking to them, perhaps nursing them or feeding them a bottle. All of those things will help to trigger all of the chemical stuff, the nervous system stuff that happens within the baby's body to help bring the baby calm and bring baby back to center. And so there is no tool or toy that will ever do it, all of those things, as well as you can. And it goes beyond co-regulation too. I'm thinking of examples like learning to talk, learning to read, things like that, learning language. So language acquisition for a new baby happens not because you have flashcards and you show them a picture of a zebra and say zebra, and you show them a picture of a ball and say ball. That's not how babies learn how to talk. It's not how babies learn how to read or recognize like the connection between objects and the language concept, that a ball, that round thing is a ball, and that means something, and the all sounds all have meaning. That's not how babies acquire language. They really just acquire it by us talking to them. So the absolute best way that you can really help your baby become a super genius is not to get little flashcards or get overly worried about how many books you're reading to your baby, but it's just to talk to your baby often. We do, of course, I don't want to poo-poo reading to your baby at all. It's really important for you to model reading to your baby so that your baby does grow up seeking out those language connections between visuals and verbal and auditory sounds and things. But the first and best way of helping your baby acquire language is to just chat with them. And so you can do that simply. I remember being a first-time mom and feeling how weird it was to be alone with this tiny baby all day long while my partner was away at work. And it was just the two of us. And I found the whole home was so quiet, it was almost oppressive. And so I just started chatting with the baby to kind of keep myself company in a way, because the baby couldn't really talk back to me. Well, of course, we interacted about stuff and told jokes to each other when my baby was hit that stage where they're giggling and kind of cooing back to me. But we started things just talking about, diaper changes. So, or I would just narrate what I was doing. So, mommy is just going to have a little bit of her tea right now. Mommy loves to drink warm tea. And I would say things like that throughout the whole day. Or as we walked, I would have a baby in a carrier and I could say, oh, we're just going to wait for the light here. And then when we get across the street, we're going to go over to the bus stop. And then we're going to get on a big bus and go across town to visit grandma. I might have said something like that. And it's in the act of talking to your baby that your baby starts to acquire language. So, you don't need special tools and things to do it. And, I like to think back to things like a really incredible example is, say, a little fellow you might have heard of named Albert Einstein. Now, Albert Einstein created a math concept that was a huge breakthrough and described the concept of space and time and how they're interconnected with each other. And he was able to do that not because he had 100 tutors throughout his early childhood, not because his mom played special games and bought special learning tools and games for him. It's because he was bored and he had a lot of time to just sit around and think as a young man. And so I want that to be kind of a lesson for you that kids, enrichment is wonderful, but they don't require it to become the geniuses that they are. Each of us will grow into our amazingness, our natural interests, and do exciting things if we're given the space to do them, if we're given the space to reach with our brains. And just the basics, like the basics of just talking regularly to your baby and narrating what's going on through your day will give them that kind of amazing start with language. And related to language, I don't know if you know this, but when babies first learn language. They actually learn it up in their heads first, and they learn to recognize spoken language in your home, main language, so your mother tongue. So if you speak Egyptian all day, like, or Arabic, all day at home, let's say, or you speak Thai all day, or you speak Norwegian all day at home, then your baby will naturally gain a facility in that language up in their heads first. But because little babies don't have the physical coordination and capacity to create verbal language themselves, but they do understand it. And so, an amazing way to help unlock your baby's voice is to give them a little bit of sign language, because they can move their hands around with some coordination. And uh, so one thing that I often see is a lot of awesome, very, very motivated millennial parents will often teach their children, like when they learn about this, they'll often teach their children a huge array of sign language, when really you just need a few useful signs. So you want to think about things like sign language around communicating their desires for food and drink. So one of the first things you can start teaching a baby, right very early, is every time you say to your baby, "Oh, would you like to nurse?" Let's say you're a breastfeeding parent. You say, "Would you like to nurse?" Or I don't know. I think I use the term num nums. I like silly little names for feeding. So, would you like to nurse or breastfeed, or would you like your num nums? Would you like some milk or milkies? I've heard. You can go like this, and it looks like just squeezing your fist like that, and it is a sign, a simple sign that mimics milking a cow, but it means milk. Would you like some milk? And then the baby will eventually start doing this to show you, yeah, they would like to nurse. Or maybe they'll do it while they're nursing to say, "Hey, mom, we're nursing right now." And then as they start to eat solids, a couple of really great signs are more and done. So you can say, if you're giving your baby a bunch of food on their plate, and they're feeding themselves, and you hear them start to fuss a little, because maybe you're also trying to prepare a little quick sandwich for yourself while your baby is sampling their foods. You can turn around and say, "More or done?" And your baby can say, "More," like, "Give me some more veggies, mom," or "Done. I don't want to eat any more of this stuff." And I find those are incredibly helpful, because you will start to feel like you're genuinely communicating with someone. Their baby is going to start telling you their needs. And I just think that's really fantastic. And the more we can interact with babies like that, and uh, the more your baby feels also that their needs are being met. And I promise you, that kind of thing will help to cut down on longer term issues like tantrums and stuff. So if your baby acquires language and is able to tell you, even before they're able to verbalize it with their mouths, they can tell you, "I'm tired," or "I'm lonely," or "I want to nurse right now," or "I want more food on my plate." When they can tell you all of those things, they have a sense of ownership and a sense of control over what's going on. And a lot of times when toddlers, when they reach a certain age, they start to get really frustrated. And that frustration is on multiple, fronts. It's often tied to their being tired, they're being hungry, but also it's tired with their frustration for inadequately being able to communicate their needs as well as feeling like maybe their needs aren't being fully um, looked after. So those things, like when you can give babies a little bit of language capability using signs, um, these are the simple signs that we started, that it really opens up their world. They don't necessarily need to know a sign for the little boy in the hat necessarily, because like they don't necessarily need to use that um, language in your everyday lives in order for them to get their needs met. So you want to consider that when you're thinking about things like, yeah, am I overthinking this? Am I over investing in teaching my child sign language? Do we need to take an entire course on sign language, or do we need to just acquire some specific useful tools? Much like if you were going to Finland for the first time, or Iceland, that's been very popular recently. I mean, outside the pandemic, of course. But, if you're going to Iceland for the first time, you might want to learn maybe a handful of phrases so that you can talk to the locals in their own language, which would make you feel more in control of things and less like you were like, oh, God, I hope I find someone who speaks really good English. And so I don't feel like I can't communicate with people. That's very similar to how babies often feel and what gets them frustrated sometimes. The same with table food, like different choices. Babies eat food. They eat food. You don't actually have to prepare it particularly specially. You don't have to boil the heck out of everything and mash it up and prepare it in a very specific way. If you want to mash your food, of course you could. A lot of parents mash their foods to make it easier for younger babies. And of course, you should be starting table foods around 6 months when your baby shows all the signs of readiness for it. But maybe some babies are having a bit of trouble with bigger solids, or parents are a little nervous. So you can just simply take the food that you make and mash it with a fork a little bit. You could take a bit of banana and mash that up with a fork, and then feed it with a spoon or even off your finger a little bit for your first couple of tastes of food with a baby. If maybe you've roasted some beets, you can take those beets and mash them down and then give the baby some of that. You don't necessarily need to take the beets. Prepare them separately from your adult food, and puree it and to a perfectly thin consistency that is slightly watered down, and then give that to baby. And in fact, opting to just give what foods the family is having is a really powerful tool in itself to help normalize eating for babies, right? A lot of parents start to think, my baby, like traditionally, we think, okay, we're getting close to 6 months, so we're going to get all the baby foods. And these days, those baby foods often come in the pouches, so they're purees that are thinned out with liquid to make them more of like like, I don't know, everything has a consistency of ketchup somehow, but make them like really quite thin and super easily digestible, and requiring no jaw strength whatsoever. When really, your baby could eat very, very thin slices of an actual apple that hasn't even been cooked as a food, because they have to learn not just how to swallow and digest food, they have to learn how to like get the food into their mouths and chew it up and swallow it. All of those are really important things. And so we can feed babies actual real food from our tables, and let them discover foods Instead of investing in like this fancy, baby pink colored food masher machine thing. I think they have those. I always forget names of things. Why do I do that? Okay, so like there's it's like a baby food processor, right? Like you could buy like a set, but I don't know how much they cost. $50, $150, when you really could just make the foods that you're already eating and feed the baby. I kind of found that when we had a baby, when we had our first baby and we started thinking about giving this baby food, we actually started eating better because I thought, well, I can't give the baby, like boxed pizza from the supermarket. That's probably not the best food source. So maybe I should, like, I don't know, roast some carrots and make some peas and some chicken. And we just naturally started eating more sort of whole food based foods because we also wanted to offer those foods to our baby. So you can take the same approach. You may find that it benefits your whole family. And you can just be simple about it. It doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be labor intensive. Bringing a baby into your family your baby should sort of slip into the family. And as opposed to be like a huge disruption of all of your systems, your entire lifestyle. It really doesn't need to be like that. So, slacker mom, my desire is for everyone to have like a real chilled out experience of parenting wherever possible. So I want you to be able to spend way more time enjoying doing things with your baby. And I keep getting these fraud phone calls. I should turn the ringer right off, shouldn't I? That would be smart, Leanne. Leanne's not so smart sometimes. Let me see. And the other thing, this is really, if you've ever worked with me, if you've ever been my client, you will know that I talk about this all the time. Baby monitors. I love baby monitors. And I love a video monitor with the sound turned off, or I love a sound monitor when you're like really far away from the baby. So in the middle of the night, if you're in your room sleeping and your baby is in their room sleeping, and usually those rooms are on the same floor, maybe separated by one or two rooms, but usually not that far away from each other, then you probably don't need a sound monitor. Because if your baby really needs to eat or really is very unhappy and needs someone to help them, they will call good and loud and they will wake you from a dead sleep. I find, and I think what we're seeing is this epidemic of parents around the world who are feeling like, oh, my baby won't sleep for more than an hour and a half at a time, and I have to nurse them or feed them ultra frequently over the night. And what I think is really happening is that every time the baby makes some noise, the monitor that everyone seems to own picks up every little noise and alerts the parent, pulls them out of sleep, alerts the parent, and then the parent thinks, okay, the baby is going, so I better rush over and help my baby. And of course, I'll feed my baby, I'll change their diaper, I'll give them a cuddle and a sing. And what ends up happening is that was actually just a little brief waking, and your baby, if they were given enough time and space, probably would have fallen back asleep for another hour and a half minimum. And you would have gotten through the night with a fewer feeds and a lot more sleep for both yourself and your baby. When as little as, say, 15 to 20 years ago, monitors weren't a big thing. Not everyone had one. And now monitors are like a requirement. It's an essential tool for most parents. It's considered an essential tool. And it's really, I mean, it's great if you're sitting in the backyard having a glass of wine after you put the baby down and you want to be able to hear the baby because you're outside and the sound of your radio might obscure if the baby was upset indoors. Or a monitor with no sound or very, very low, the sound turned very, very low. If that were to wake you up and you saw the baby sort of moving around and calling out a little bit, making noise, then with a monitor, at least you could see, like, you could watch the baby and see, are they frantic or are they just doing very typical sleepy behavior, like flapping their legs up and down? That's actually a sign. A lot of parents misinterpret it. They think it's a sign that the baby is upset or frantic, and it's actually a sign that the baby is trying to get themselves back to sleep. So things like flapping their legs up and down, squirming around, calling out with little squeaks and small calls, like a little bit of, I call it whinging. If you're old school, someone from England or Ireland, then you're probably familiar with whinging, but it's kind of like a little whiny. And if the baby is doing that, often that's a sound, like that's a self-soothing technique. So the baby is kind of trying to just make some noises to discharge some of the feelings in their bodies so they can settle back down. And so again, I encourage you to look for solutions that are simpler, because simple solutions are almost always way better than any alternative. And they're almost always either free or inexpensive, which is another big theme for us Gen Xers. We don't want to spend money on unnecessary stuff. And then the final thing that I'll sort of address is to be wary of shark oil. And, the minute you became pregnant and you started looking around at birthy, pregnancy, baby stuff, the prices of things suddenly go up. It's like when you look for something for a wedding, you could go to the dollar store and get like a little mirror ball, or you could go to a wedding store and buy a little mirror ball, and both of them will be produced by the exact same company, but the dollar store one will cost $1.50 and the one at the wedding store will cost $10.50. Like there is a baby tax, as it were, on everything, just like there's a wedding tax on everything, or there's a pink tax on women's stuff. And so I want you to be aware that there are companies out there that, while they do want to make your life easier, they also want to capitalize on the things that you're worried about in order to line their own pockets. So think about things like gripe water, or any bottle that says, a baby bottle that says it's anti-colic or anti-gas. So this is surrounding these two remedies or things, examples that I'm talking about, revolve around gas, baby upset. And if your baby has colic, then drinking their milk from a special bottle with a doodad in it is not going to resolve their colic. Oftentimes, colic has to do with an immature esophageal muscle that allows stomach acid to splash back up their throats, makes it easier for them to spit up their milk that they've just drank, if they are maybe laid down too quickly afterwards or they're jostled around a little too much. It can also have to do with their nervous system. And we often joke that colic is it a 5-letter word that means, I don't know. Like, we don't really have definitive answers, but we do know that when we address certain things like the baby's um, like an immature esophagus, when we adjust for that, we often see the intense crying and throwing up that are markers of colic. We see that go down often. So we also see babies, when a baby gets upset, they just cry. They don't have the language to tell us, hey, I'm feeling like really tired right now, and the radio in the car is annoying the hell out of me. And if you would just turn it off, if we could have a quiet drive, I will probably fall asleep here in the car. No, they'll just cry and scream really hard because they don't know how to communicate their needs, get those needs met. And they probably don't even know how to articulate those needs in their head. They just know they're not happy at that moment. They may be teething. They may have teeth coming in. And I can tell you that there's so many people say, oh, my baby is teething and that's why they're so upset. And as a mom who's had a couple of babies sprout all of their teeth and then have them fall out and then come back in again, well, they don't necessarily cry when the teeth come in. You'll wake up and discover there are teeth on your baby and you didn't notice that happen, and the baby gave you no indication. And when they're older, their teeth will come through, then your children will not get fevers, they will not get upset, they will not get cranky. You're not going to have a cranky 10-year-old because their molars are coming through. It's really, some babies have a temperament that they're a little more sensitive to things and will react a little stronger. But the average baby doesn't react that strongly to certain things. And so when you take this little bottle of gripe water or anti-colic drops, anti-gas drops, you're not necessarily going to be helping the baby. Often what we'll see is the baby will be really upset and the mom tries everything. And then she goes, get me those special drops, the gripe water drops or the anti-colic drops. And they will drop or a few drops in the baby's mouth, and the baby will go and suck them up, swallow them down, and immediately stop crying and start to settle. But it wasn't the gripe water itself. It was the interruption into their system. It was the chance to maybe eat something, which the act of nursing and drinking milk actually has a calming effect on babies. It was like a huge interruption into what was going on in their brain, into their, and suddenly the baby has to go, oh, what is this I'm eating? So it's really important that we understand that there are certain things like the fancy expensive bottles with weird doohickeys in them and kind of these little mysterious remedies of non-medicine medicines, those supplemental things like gripe water and stuff. All of those things, we have to take those with a grain of salt and understand that what's probably going on has nothing to do with those things. And the companies that are selling those things are hoping that you take the association between interrupting your baby's system and having your baby calm down suddenly, that you attribute it to their product and then continue to buy their product, which functionally doesn't do anything. Because I promise you, it doesn't matter how you can feed a baby, formula or breast milk with a tube, and that food will still hit the baby's gut And the bacteria that live in the baby's gut will still produce gas, and your baby will still get gas bubbles inside their belly, which sometimes they have a hard time passing, and sometimes those bubbles will cause them some pain and discomfort, just like with you or I when we drink maybe a bottle of soda or some Perrier or something, and then like we realize an hour later we've got a weird pain in our bellies because it happens. um gas happens, and the best thing to do for it is to give baby a little massage, give them a little extra love, because you are their first and best remedy for almost everything. So I didn't want this to be much like a lecture. I want you to think about things in a way like, am I doing something that serves me really well? By all means, buy fun things, do fun things with your baby, choose tools that you feel deeply resonate with you and help to alleviate the problems that you may find that you're having. But I also want you to realize that just you have a lot of the tools you need to help remedy babies' problems. And if you are feeling up to the task, then you can remedy those problems at very little expense, and usually at very little, personal interruption. If you're feeling like you're not up to the task, of course, that's when tools become really helpful. Um, and you should rely on them at that point. So, from one slacker who really loves low tech, simple tools that are not too overthought, to you millennial moms, I hope I have given you a few things to think about. I hope I have given you a little a little idea for how you may adjust things for yourself so that you don't become overly worried about things. I promise a baby who sleeps in their parents' bed will not still be doing so as a 10-year-old, unless, of course, you want that. A baby who nurses all day long and all night long will not still be nursing all day and all night long as a 10-year-old. I mean, unless you want that, but I don't think either party wants that at that point. I'm not going to judge, but you'll probably not want that by then. You will not need to pat your baby's belly to sleep when they're in college. Your children will naturally grow out of these needful phases as they get older, and you'll find one day, oh my God, I'm gonna get a little clamped. You'll find you look back and you miss all of it. I got teenagers. It's been a hard year, but you're gonna miss the hard stuff. So, if it's possible, slow yourself down a little. Take an assessment of what stuff is super important to you. And have a look around and see, can we get rid of some of this clutter? Some of this stuff we don't actually need for our baby? Because I promise you, you probably can. And you'll probably be happier because of it. Well, this is the last one before Christmas, so I want to thank you very much for joining us on what became a surprisingly emotional moment for me. Thanks for joining us for Birth and Baby Talk. We really appreciate your being here, and we hope you and your family are enjoying a really amazing holiday. What an interesting, different holiday it is. I hope that you're finding comfort in the quietness that is around us this year for this holiday. And, as always, if there's anything that we can do to make your lives better, please reach out to us at the Family Doulas of Ottawa, Toronto Family Doulas, and Hamilton Family Doulas. And come back next week for our last show of the year. All of us, all four of us, owners and hosts here at Birth and Baby Talk, will be getting together and we will be kissing off 2020. I hope you don't get offended easily because we did not enjoy this year nearly as much as we should have. And we want to say goodbye to it. We're going to reflect on the year as it was and look up with joy and excitement to 2021. And we hope you'll join us. Take care.